You're listening to The Breakfast Show on Faith FM, special Big Camp 2026 edition here. I am joined by my mate Lawson of Lawsons and producer Shell here with us in our makeshift studio here at the Prayer Chapel at Big Camp. If you're in Big Camp, give us a shout out. We'd love to catch up with you and to, get to know your story and talk about your favorite things on Faith FM. And if you're not at Big Camp, well, make plans to come next year. It always happens about that, it's school holidays time. It's here in the mid-north coast of New South Wales, around the Bucca Heads area, between Kempsey and Coffs Harbour. Yeah. So, we're looking forward to get to know you, even if you just come for the day.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, now we are going to start this segment with our dear producer Shell giving us a new quiz question. So please, producer Shell, what do you have for us?
All right. So this one's a little bit of a thinker, I guess, but I think you guys are going to get it fine.
Okay.
After their commissioning, the disciples received the Holy Spirit like cloven tongues as of fire. Who had a similar igniting experience before he was commissioned? So after their commissioning, the disciples received the Holy Spirit like cloven tongues as of fire. Who had a similar igniting experience before he was commissioned?
Igniting experience. This is I'm entering to the interpretation world here because I think there's a catch there with this igniting experience here. Let me see.
Yeah.
I do not know. Maybe. How about that one?
Not correct.
What are you thinking about?
That's like.
I said the Apostle Paul.
Yeah.
I was thinking igniting in that, it started with like supernatural revelation of him, when he saw Jesus coming and the sun was brightening. It was he saw a light shining as bright as the sun.
No, so something that ignites fire was used just before he was commissioned and called to work and service.
Bro, hold on.
I just did a devotional on this.
Are we Old Testament territory or New Testament territory?
How it matters before you're commissioned and after, and how God equips you. So who would that be?
Okay, Lawson, I think, has a lens.
You
Tell
got
me I'm right.
it.
Tell
You
me I'm
got
right.
it.
Tell me I'm right.
Well done. Well done.
Hey.
You're
Shell,
there.
I'm right there with you. We're looking at the same thing. That's really cool. Good on you. Yeah. We're a part of a club that Skafy's not in right now. We're just laughing it up. We're just enjoying it.
All right, 0491 064 669. If you know who was, and I guess the disciples, they had their thing that was like a tongue of fire. So, and this person's was kind of, should I give a little clue?
Please, clues. I need more clues.
Something else related to maybe the mouth area was involved in this guy's igniting. Okay, that's all I'm going to say.
Okay, I think then I'll try another shot here, and I'll say this guy.
Yeah, Shell, you just gave it away.
I'm part of the club now. You make room for good old Skafy here.
The standard, and this is the riff-raff we got in our
want
club.
the discount on the merch that you guys have in your club. I'm part of it.
Have you know the answer?
I want to get this discounted accordion because you're selling here, Lawson.
I'm not selling any accordions. I'm asking for them, but I'm not allowed to ask for them, so don't send them to me. 0491 064 669 is the number to text if you know the answer to that one. You are listening to The Breakfast Show here on Faith FM, and we have been discovering, understanding pride and pride in our lives. And we had none other than Nina Atchison on the show yesterday, the writer of our 20 Million Movement Study Guide. So these are actually written by people all over the world, famous voices and, amazing Christian people and whatnot. And this particular lesson is written by someone that's, right here in New South Wales. And so we got to talk to them, explore it. We're continuing on, though, jumping into talking about Moses. It's going to be very interesting.
Okay.
Do you think Moses was humble?
Well, let's look into it. I think he was very humble, actually.
Oh.
But so I actually want to really look into that because there is a passage here. Basically, what we are talking here, just take one step back here, Lawson. We're talking about how to grow in our relationship with Christ.
Sure.
This is the theme of our quarter. And one of the things that can hinder us from coming to God is pride. So we started the week talking about pride, and then we were in a bit of a transition talking about the story of between the Pharisee and the tax collector, moving from, how do we move from pride to humility? Today we're going to be exploring humility. Because in the same way that pride drives us further from Christ, from our relationship with Christ, humility has the opposite effect.
Wow.
And so today we're going to be looking into that. And there is a Bible passage here that I always found interesting, to say the least. But I'll tell you why. Mm-hmm. Because look, if you're bragging about your humility, are you being humble? Or are you being proud?
I don't know. Like it's never an issue for me because I never brag about how humble I am. That's how humble I am.
There you go. So you can see here that Lawson is struggling with pride right now. Please pray for him, everyone.
I've never bragged before in my life. That's how humble I am.
That's right. But look, because there's a Bible passage here that I wanted to talk to you about. It's Numbers chapter 12 and verse 3.
Classic. Okay? Yep.
This is a parenthetical statement here in most Bibles. Let's have a look into that one because this is a tricky. I think this is a fairly tricky Bible passage. We need to look into it carefully here to see what we can find out. So, why don't you read it for us?
Yeah, it says, "Now the man Moses was very humble, more than all the men who were on the face of the earth."
That's right. So the context here is that Miriam, Moses' sister, and Aaron, they were speaking against Moses. They're gossiping, and they're speaking against him because of his Ethiopian wife. So Moses married an Ethiopian woman.
They're jealous, bro.
They're jealous, and they're talking bad about her. They're she didn't do anything to them at all. And then they said, "Has the Lord indeed spoken only through Moses? Has he not spoken through us?" Also, they're feeling entitled here. There's a little bit of that, entitlement. And the Lord heard it. And now there's a parenthetical statement. Parenthetical means there's a parenthesis here in my Bible. It says, "Now, the man Moses," or that guy Moses, "was very humble. Indeed, he was more humble than any man who were on the face of the earth." The problem here is that the book of Numbers is written by Moses. Mm-hmm. And Moses is written the book and saying, "Hey, I'm actually the humblest guy in the whole entire world. There's no one before me has ever been humble before. Nobody after." So when you look into that,
my
people,
enemies don't even consider me to be humble, but I'm the most humble guy.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So a lot of people look into that passage and saying, "Man, I mean, this is not really humility. If you're bragging yourself to seem like you're the most humble guy in the whole entire world."
Yeah.
Certain for our culture, it sounds like bragging.
Yeah.
So
massively.
Let's have a look into different Bible translations here and see how they translate that passage.
Okay. So I read the New King James. What did you read from?
Okay. Let me read from the Old King James.
Okay.
"Now the man Moses was very meek." So the word here is meek, "above all the men which were upon the face of the earth." And the Young Literal Translation says very humble. The majority translation says that include the word humble. Okay? Except for the Old King James that says meek, which I think it's kind of in the ballpark, really, of that. So, how do you make that? How do you justify that? So, do you think that it was Moses was being humble and just saying, "Look, I'm just like the humblest person on earth"? Or do you think it's something else? How do you interpret that?
Yeah, look, I would say this. Humility is all about, being a humble person is all about recommending others among yourself. Recognizing your place. Like, if you're puffed up and you're proud and arrogant, it's looking at yourself as better or more than you are, particularly in comparison to others. And then kind of self-deprecation is, the opposite of that, and kind of just as harmful to go like, especially that real false humility, like, "Oh, I'm so bad, I'm so terrible." I think it's actually just as selfish or just as harmful as a thought to go down that route as well. And people often do it to attract sympathy, right? So, people who are obviously like that bad, then they like call themselves that bad, so that then people will like have some kind of sympathy. Whereas to be truly humble is to know your place in respect to others and in respect to God. And particularly, if you understand that I'm a human, so therefore I am on the same level, plane, status as other humans, and I'm willing to be a servant to humans, just as we all should be servants, as Jesus, identifies for us. And I'm willing to serve God because he's clearly above me, which Moses had recognized. I would say he has the right to say, yeah, I'm the humblest man on earth. In fact, I'm one of the few that is humble. That's my take.
Okay. I'll tell you. Okay. I don't think you're far off at all. But I have a slightly different suggestion here. The word here for humble in Greek is anau.
In Greek?
In Hebrew.
Okay.
It's anau.
Sorry to get on your case like that. But,
okay. And it can mean humble. It can mean meek. It can also mean afflicted, poor, low, or gentle. So of all the translations here that we have, I will go with the good old King James version and say the word meek. Meek in the sense of gentle. Why is that? Now, Skafy, are you saying that Moses was not humble? Saying I think that Moses was really humble. Like in the actual humility side of things, he was very low in pride.
Sure.
He was actually it's an interesting thing. We know when Jesus says, "Blessed are the poor in spirit." In some translations of the Bible, not from Greek but in Aramaic, it says, "Blessed are those who are poor in pride." They translate it as that. There's this connection between being poor and being humble, being meek. So Moses was that. We can see this in his life. But when he says that he was the most humble man on earth, he was not saying this in a braggadocious way. Now, you said something interesting there, Lawson. Humility is not the intelligent man saying that he's dumb or the beautiful girl saying that she's ugly. This is not humility.
Yeah.
Humility is for you not to exalt yourself above what you are. When Moses says that he was the most humble, actually, that was a deprecatory statement for him, which actually corroborates to his humbling. Because to be meek, meaning that Moses was not, in today's language would be like he was conflict avoidant. He didn't want to pick up a fight. He heard his brother and his sister talking bad about his wife. And guess what? He's not going to fight with them. But Moses used that in a way to say, look, you know what? I'm someone that avoids conflict. So much so that I do not know if you remember that. We can see this in the life of Moses as well. Do you remember Moses was actually on the brink of having a burnout earlier in his career?
Yeah.
Remember? He was trying to help everybody. Oh, my nail is broken. Go talk to Moses. Moses will go there. We'll sit down with all the patients and help them. To the point that Jethro, his father-in-law, came to him and says, Moses, like, you're going to burn out. You're going to kill yourself for doing this. Why don't you appoint people to help out with this? And Moses didn't think about that because that was not his personality. He ended up finding elders and people to help him rule and judge the less difficult cases of the people of God. But that was not his nature. So when Moses says Moses was the most humble man on earth, he was saying, look, it's in the sense of weak, of meek, of gentle, of someone that, look, he did not want to fight. So he is actually saying this in a way to say, look, I actually have an issue here. I have a problem here. But guess what? God was going to defend Moses.
Wow.
And when we look into the book of Matthew, when we go back to the Old Testament, we see this concept twice in the Beatitudes. We see, blessed are those who are poor in spirit, like humble in spirit. Some translations actually bring that, humble in spirit. But also Jesus says, blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who are not picking up a fight. They were not, fighting with others. And that I believe is the context here. When Moses says, this is how I read it. When he says, look, I'm the humblest guy in the earth. Not that he's humble in that he is humble, but he's saying, look, I did not want to pick up a fight with my siblings because I was almost like in the sense of I was the weakest man on the earth. And he's acknowledging, one of his limitations.
Wow.
in that story.
Yeah, wow. Okay, well, there you go. So we see here Moses identifying
Which is a
that.
big act of humility.
Yeah.
For you to acknowledge your limitations, that's humility.
Absolutely. Now, our focus text for this particular passage in the 20 million movement is actually about Moses in the book of Hebrews. And it reads as such. I'm going to pick things up here in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 24. It says, by faith, Moses, when he became of age, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to suffer affliction with the people of God than to enjoy the passing pleasures of sin, esteeming the reproach of Christ greater riches than the treasures in Egypt, for he looked to the reward. Look, I really like how you've explained things in what Moses, in what he's trying to communicate by writing in, of himself. I'm the most humble, or I'm the meekest man.
Yeah. Or the weak. You could even say wicked. You can translate it as the weakest.
The weakest. But I would even contend, and I'm not disagreeing with you. I actually agree. But even if he's writing, I'm the most humble, like the fruits are clear in Moses' life. What Moses could have become he was in line to become another oppressor of his people easily, like to be another oppressor of them, and even to be, like Stockholm Syndrome's a thing. He could have been like the nice oppressor. He could have been like, oh, you guys, you can stay in here, and I won't, suffer you guys as much affliction because I'm actually one of you, and da-da-da-da-da. And he could have been like kind of loved by the people despite oppressing them, but rather he gave up all of that fortune, all of those things, to go and suffer with the people of God. Yeah. We're going to dive into this more. We're going to see Moses' actions, Moses' humility.
You're listening to the Breakfast Show podcast on Faith FM. Positively different.
Now I have a need for an answer. I demand an answer from producer Shell here.
You figured it out already.
I figured it out. Yeah, that was it.
Yeah. So
I was thinking New Testament.
After rigorous clues.
Yeah.
Yeah, part of the club.
Had to give you a gimme, but So the question was, after their commissioning, the disciples received the Holy Spirit like cloven tongues as of fire. Who had a similar igniting experience before he was commissioned? And that was Isaiah. Like coal was brought straight from the altar, and touched his lips and lit him up, I guess. So then he accepted who shall I send? And he said, send me.
Yeah.
Actually,
such an awesome
I actually
his commissioning.
Was hearing a presentation about that topic, a sermon, actually a series on the book of Isaiah, which was very interesting. And the preacher is actually an amazing guy called Jacques Ducan. And he actually made a point there, I haven't seen it before, that commissioning of Isaiah was most likely a second commissioning. Because this is like chapter 6 already into the book. It's well and truly into the story of Isaiah. But Isaiah, at some point, he lost heart. He was struggling. He was struggling because of all the apostasy of Israel, the death of the king. And then God had to remind him or do him like a second call. Kind of like what happened to Peter. Peter also had 2 calls. He was called as a disciple of Jesus, but then Jesus called him again to feed my sheep. After the resurrection, after, Peter also, fell back and so on. So it's quite amazing how, God's calling can sometimes be more than just once in our life.
Yeah. Actually, I love that story of Isaiah. Not to get into it too much, but like, I can understand why he's frustrated, because for the first 5 chapters, he's been running around telling everyone like, woe is you because X, Y, Z, and rightly so. But he's finding no change. And that's that's what we see. He's taken to heaven. He's taken into the courtrooms of heaven. Yeah. And he sees, the God and the angels singing holy and all these things. And he says, wow, woe is me.
Elijah the same. Elijah also had 2 commissions. When he was depressed. So it's not it's a theme in the Bible. Sometimes when we're facing,
I think the theme of the fire is really important too, because before he's commissioned, he is ignited, and then when they are commissioned, the disciples, they also get that fire that comes to help them. And what is it that when we are bringing someone to the Lord, what is it that we're giving to them? It says, did not my heart burn? And in Jeremiah, he says, his word was in my heart like a burning fire.
Yeah.
So we're sharing that fire with other people. And then that spreads like wildfire. So you got this like whole theme of,
the fire as well.
Yeah.
Love it.
And I think we can really continue to draw these parallels because we can also see like the rigorous transformation of character that the disciples needed before they were ready to, take the fire, to take the Holy Spirit. They kind of have that initial contact with Jesus, which for them is, 3.5 years. And they realize their sinfulness. They realize their state. And it's once that happens, that's when the fire hits. I think Isaiah similarly, when he realizes, actually, woe is me, then the fire hits. And I think it's the same for us today. Like, we come into contact with Jesus and we realize our state. That's when he can actually do something with us. And he can give us the fire. That's powerful. Oh, why don't we just talk about that? Nah, I'm just kidding. We're talking about Moses. We're talking about humility. And I'm really excited too because I love this section in the book of Hebrews highlighting, the really particular and specific ways that people were faithful to God.
Yeah.
And what we see here in Hebrews 24, it's talking about Moses' faith in forsaking his new lineage, forsaking that he could have just become another pharaoh, another oppressor.
He'll be a billionaire in his word. It was all up for grabs for him. He had like success, the fame, the power, the authority.
Yeah.
He could might as well be a pharaoh, a benevolent pharaoh.
Yeah.
And yet he chose to give up on all of that so that he would, take upon him the sufferings of Christ, the shame of the cross, the humility that comes with it. Now he's being a pilgrim in the desert. He was like for 40 years working as a lowly herdsman, a lowly shepherd in the desert to then lead his people, the people of God, to the wilderness. Actually, I want to talk to you about that, Lawson. Let's talk about the life of Moses. In what way? So this is one, Moses, chose, what is that the book of Hebrew says? He preferred the reproach of Christ and he esteemed that as greater riches than the treasures of Egypt. So, I like this idea of, the reproach of Christ because this is an ambiguous statement, right?
Sure.
The reproach of Christ in Greek, this is the word, oneidismon. It can mean two things. It can mean the insult or the reproach. So it can mean both things. Number one, while following Christ or following God, that there's going to attract a reproach for you. You're going to be despised. You're going to be seen as a as a loser.
Guy. Yeah.
For the world, before the world. Oh, you're a Christian, you're a loser. I think that we still even have that, even in today's day and age. We still have a little bit of that.
Sure.
But also there's the element where the reproach of Christ, like he was reproached by Christ a number of times. He was disciplined by God.
Yeah.
In particular, when he struck the rock.
Yeah.
He struck the rock instead of, just speaking to it.
Yeah. And I mean, this section of Hebrews goes on into the next chapter, in chapter 12, and it talks about that idea of, whom God loves, he rebukes in chastening.
Yeah.
He who was without chastening, he's an illegitimate son. Moses, and this is kind of a cool thing in Moses' story. Think about that, right? So Moses attempts to kind of very much in his own way to do the right thing. His conscience is telling him, oh, this isn't right that my people are slaves while I'm royalty. So he kind of tries to do the right thing. He ends up killing a servant, killing a soldier. His people reject him as a result, and kind of rightfully so. They're like, oh,
bro, are you bossing over us now? And
yeah. What are you going to kill us?
Who do you think you are? You think you're the savior?
It was like a real savior complex kind of moment. What we actually see is that while Moses had some good intentions, he was trying to save the people in his own strength and kind of for his own notoriety and benefit. And that leads him to kill, right? And they reject him. And so he runs to the wilderness. He has this kind of real realization moment. And he gets to, for 40 years, experience wilderness life and being a farmer. But, kind of this is the space in which he learns his humility, and he realizes, hey, I'm actually not all that. Like, I'm royalty, but I can just as easily, like, I've lost all of my privileges. I can just as easily be a farmer. Like, I may as well be a slave. I'm just a guy. And I think it's cool at the moment, like Moses, through his own actions, brings his own suffering onto himself. Then God raises him up to be a leader. And then as he starts to go through that process, then God can start to chip away at Moses' character and smooth it over. But what's really cool is that in his really low moments, God isn't coming to him and saying, Moses, you're a bad person.
No,
Moses,
no.
You need to change. He's coming and saying, oh, Moses, have you finally realized that you're not me?
Yeah.
Like, have you finally realized that you need me? Let's go.
Look, I love it. Look, when we look at the moments of Moses' life, right? There is the first things that he would rather be poor with Christ.
Yeah.
He'd rather be despised with Christ than to be hailed and worshipped and idolized in Egypt. That's the first element of humility. He did not want the positions of the world. He did not want the careers, the titles. He saw in Jesus way more value than any of that. Then you mentioned here he was rebuked by God. He was stopped by God. And what was his response every time? Was he murmuring against God? Was he pushing back against God? Was he doing like Saul and he was trying to justify, oh yeah, but I only did this because this and that? Yeah. He quietly submitted and accepted it.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Right. We see when God was angry at the nation of Israel, Moses came to the point, I think to me this is one of the greatest highlights. I think that God tested Moses. So let me see, Moses, what's inside in your heart. Moses, I have an idea. These people is a rebellious people, and I want to wipe them out, kill all of them, and I'll restart the nation of Israel through you. How about that? What was Moses' response? Do you remember?
Yeah, he contended for the people.
Says, Lord, look.
No way.
I mean, what are people going to do?
Yeah.
What are people going to say about you, Lord? I'm concerned about your reputation about that. But you know what? If you need to kill someone, just kill me then and forgive them.
Sure.
Like erase my name from your book, from the book of life. But please forgive his people. And then God said, okay, I changed my mind now, Moses. Not that God changed his mind. I believe that God was testing Moses to say, okay, Moses, let me see if you really love these people the way that I love you too. And we would never know how much Moses loved the people if God didn't give him that test.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that is humility as well. Humility is saying, look, you know what? I would, it's what we were talking about yesterday in the show. Moses' motto was, these things we do that others may live.
Yeah, wow.
He lived by that.
Absolutely.
This is the pararescue special forces team in the United States Air Force. This is what their motto, that others may live.
Yeah. I think what's interesting with Moses as well, just highlighting the fact that as his life continued, God brought him greater challenge to grow him. Like Moses continued to make steps. You'd hope that, oh man, like you've battled with Pharaoh. You've crossed the Red Sea. Like, that is enough legacy and history for anyone's life. Like, it could have just fallen off. And by fallen off, I mean the difficulty of Moses' life. God could have just made it easy after that. That could have been his forever after. He's happily and they walked out of the Red Sea. And happily forever after. But no, that's not the case. Like, it got more difficult and more difficult for Moses, like throughout his life. And that's because God kept putting him in positions that would stretch Moses, that would enable Moses to grow through his, realization of his need for God. And his growing faithfulness. Like, it's one thing to have your enemies against you. I think of this, Moses with Pharaoh, but it's another thing to have the very people that you have saved to fight against you as well, right? And so Moses is facing greater challenge and greater challenge and greater challenge and greater challenge throughout his life. What I'm trying to get at is that for the experience of someone desiring to live for Jesus today, unfortunately, and I would rather say fortunately, for your own sake, this will likely be the lot of your life. I just think of myself. Like I think of my experience with God, and I just think like throughout the years, having like difficult circumstances or whatever it may be, and then like finding, solutions in God and finding, ways around it or over it, and thinking, oh man, like I've cleared that hurdle. Now it should just be smooth sailing. And then the next challenge comes. But it's something that's, to a greater scope, a greater scale, in terms of, importance and responsibility. It's stretching me as a person, but it's also enabling me and teaching me how I can more be like God, more be like Jesus. And
the problem is not having difficulties in our life. The problem is, it's not about difficulties. We will have difficulties. The problem is when we have difficulties, but God is not helping us. That's the problem. That's when the real problem starts.
Yeah.
But when you have difficulties, well, this is God saying, hey, there's a challenge here. I am going to show myself to your life and for the sake of the world, like we saw in the story of Ahab. If you cling on to me in prayer, in humility, in my wisdom, guess what? I'm going to do something out of it.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, all of these challenges that come, they suddenly become opportunities for God to reveal Himself.
That's right. And it's often that, again, my point here is that the challenges will become greater because you'll grow.
Yeah.
And then you'll be able to meet the previous challenges like, oh, I don't have, and then a greater challenge, but it'll be greater responsibility. And with those greater challenges, usually what comes out of that is greater blessing. I just know, look, I can attest my experience being a pastor, starting last year and going into this year. And man, like I hit a steep learning curve last year, like just steep and feeling so inadequate, like so unable to do my work. I'd be lying if I said I hadn't thought about quitting. I'd be lying if I said that I hadn't, pulled up Indeed.com and just seen like, hey, what other jobs are kicking around out there? Now, this isn't coming out of like a desire, I don't feel called to this anymore, but I'm like, man, this is so hard.
I've had these moments
and
myself.
These challenges are difficult. And the real feeling that I had is like, I'm just not good enough to do this. Why would I get put here? Right? Moses felt this way.
And what do you think that God was saying to you at that point?
It's like, what God was saying to me is often what He said to Moses. It's like, hey, like it's actually my job. This is the biggest thing that I think I've learned is that it's your job to be faithful. It's my job to do the work, right? And by faithfulness, I mean as well, this work that
this effort
that we are to put in. But in terms of actually getting the results, I was incredibly scared of failing. This is maybe one of the greatest fears in my life. I have an overwhelming fear of failure in my life. And man, it's paralyzing. And especially as you take on more responsibility, your failures have a greater potential fallout. Man, I'm like a pastor of a church, and I'm like, even though it was so hilarious, it was like there's people doing much greater things than I am, but taking on that level of responsibility for me personally, I'm like, man, if I fail, this is people's life on the stage, at stake, their salvation, their spirituality, it's all on me, and I've got to work so hard, and I'm so stressed, and just God just reminding me throughout that. And I think what I've learned throughout that process is, like, Lawson, I can turn your failures into good easily. Like,
yeah,
I can fix, Lawson, I can easily fix all your problems.
He can fix, or the way that I say, I'm not afraid of failures anymore, because look, even if I fail, well, you know what? This is going to be a big lesson.
Yeah.
Lesson in life. And, it's something new to learn about it.
Yeah.
It's failing forward. Every failure that I see it's free education in the school of Christ.
Absolutely.
You're listening to the Breakfast Show podcast on Faith FM. Positively different.
And we have been, talking about Moses. And really, I've been really enjoying it, considering his humility and considering how we can have an experience like him. And, maybe you're thinking, I don't want to have an experience like Moses. That sounds really hard. But I will say this. It was an experience that led him to heaven. So, hey, look, let's get into our giveaway before we go any further. What are we giving away today, Skafy?
So we are giving away a birthday surprise. So if you were born in April and you'd like to receive an incredible Bible, or which is one of the best qualities out there, a really premium Bible, or cookbooks of your choice. We have a bunch of cookbooks. You can choose a cookbook from Jeremy Dixon. You can choose a cookbook from Sue Red. Some of the best cookbooks that exist out there. It can be yours. If you're into board games, we can give you a wingspan, or if you're into experiences, we can take you out for a dinner. So let us know what is your preference. We also have a $50 cash that, we'll be able to, buy you, I don't know, maybe 2 liters of diesel, and you can use that for that if you want. Whatever floats your boat, we got you covered. So how do you participate into that, Lawson?
Hey, all you have to do is to send through your birthday, if it is in the month of April, to 0491 064 669. My mum just bought diesel for cheap. She got a deal and a half, $2.95 a liter. Which is just an unimaginably wild.
It's actually
deal.
cheap comparing from what's been going on.
Yeah, shout out. So, hey, 0491 064 669 is the number to text. Now, we've been talking about Moses. We've been talking about humility. We've been talking about the lessons that we can learn from him. We kind of highlighted in our last section. I talked a bit personally about, taking on greater responsibility, and with those comes greater difficulties and, maybe a higher amount of doubt and struggle. But through those, God can actually stretch us and expand us and help us to see and to realize, who we can be if we're working alongside him. I think that's really amazing.
Yeah, it's definitely something. To look at the life of Moses and see all these different areas where he was humble. He was humble in choosing God rather than the praises of the world. He was humble, accepting the rebukes from God. He was humble sometimes in not so good ways when he didn't stand up for his wife. But you know what? God had his back. Because Moses basically, when his wife was being accused, he was basically silent. And God said, okay, you 3, come out of the tent. We're going to have a conversation here. But particularly when Moses was, he would rather die, he would rather forfeit his eternity than to see his people perishing. I think this is probably the most, humble of all of his moments.
Yeah.
And I look at that and say, hey, am I humble like that as well? There's actually a question here, and maybe this is something that we can share, Lawson, because at the 20 Million Movement Guide, there's a question like, if your friends would describe you, Lawson, do you think that they would use the adjectives humble? You think like this is the first thing that comes to people's minds when they think about Lawson Walters, like, man, he's humble.
Yeah, we've got shakes of the head here in the studio. Look, and I'm not
asking. Don't need to respond.
Because the most
just like
humble people
rhetorical.
like me are often persecuted, pushed around.
But it's something for us. I mean,
absolutely.
if humble is not one of the first things that describe us, maybe they should. Because this is what described Jesus. When we think about Jesus, do we think about the word humble? Oh, yes, we think. When we think about Moses, do we think about the word humble? Yes, we do. And I think this is something, perhaps my prayer today that I actually want to suggest that you pray that with me, is that, God, can you please help me to realize how can I become more humble? In what areas am I not displaying the humility of Christ? And can you please help me to be more humble today?
Absolutely. I love what you're saying here, especially in highlighting the fact that Moses' humility is not Moses' humility. It's God's humility. It's Christ's humility in him. So, hey, let us go to Jesus and say, may you establish humility in me. Come to the end of the show, Skafy.
Come to the end of the show. We see you tomorrow. So talk faith, live faith, and act faith.
God be with you till we meet again. God be with you till we meet again.
Thanks for being a part of the Faith FM family. Join our community on Facebook or get in touch at 1-800-FAITH-FM.